Okay. We might have survived the disconnect once more, as our brutal ISP decides to nuke the connection. That is very unfortunate. Okay. So, yeah, we were at the science abilities. So usually you will see the hazard emitters for the hull healing and the damage reduction, the transfer shield strength for the increased shield heal, and some damage absorption, like 8% damage reduction against your shields. That is quite good. The science team to cleanse yourself off of subnucleonic beam, for example. That, however, highly is dependent on what you are doing. Like if you fly a no-win scenario, you might want to use this instead of transfer shield strength, just because some enemies could come up that actually have the subnucleonic beam. That would not be cool to get subnuked and not be able to clear it. Outside of that, you will always want the tractor beam repulsor for no-win scenario builds. You will always want the gravity well for no-win scenario builds. Everything else it's not really required for a PvE damage build right now. Engine, that is a little more interesting, as you will usually see emergency power 2 weapons in, well, either of the ranks basically. Emergency power 2 weapons 1 is okay already. It awards you 10% plus damage on energy weapons, which is quite good, and a fair amount of weapons power, which is also very important. Even if you are already at 125 due to overcap, and however that really works out in the end, just trust me that you kind of want it. The emergency power to shields you will usually see as well. If you use an emergency power to subsystem, that will go into a 45-second cooldown with a lockout to other emergency power abilities for 15 seconds, and that basically gives you a buff for 30 seconds. Okay, so you have the 45-second cooldown with 30-second buff and the 15-second lockout, which enables you to mix it up with another emergency power to subsystem ability. So usually you will see a combination of weapons and shields, and then some way of reducing their respective cooldowns, so you can actually use them alternatingly every single time. Engineering team is rarely seen on bigger cruisers where you don't really come up with another important ability. Hull healing seems to be the major issue, so that is sometimes seen. The auxiliary to battery for all Federation cruisers. Auxiliary to structural, not that often. It is rarely seen at best. Directed energy modulation, if you have the Marin Francis Dormer duty officer, that one becomes quite good as to your spike damage. If you don't have the DOF, you can kind of keep it. It's not that worth it though. Higher ranks of emergency power to weapons award 13.3% on the lieutenant grade and 16.6% on the lieutenant commander grade. The reverse shield polarity is a beautiful defensive ability, as it will make you almost unkillable in PvE. Outside of that, you don't really need anything of the other abilities. Like for the average cruiser, you could even use emergency power to weapons 3, directed energy modulation, which is commander rank 3 ability, then 2 aux to bats, a emergency power to shields, and attack team, for example. So let's now actually have a look at all the different possible ships that we could find. Therefore, I will go over to the guy that has those beautiful ships in store, and we can have a short look at all their bridge obstacle layouts. So what really makes a good ship? I mean, you usually see people flying around with what they see on the show and think, yeah, it's the Enterprise, it must be a good ship, right? So when you look at this, This part is important as well, don't get me wrong here. Like, it is a Star Trek game, therefore you should like what you see. Promise you have to take this part into consideration also. And these values down here are kind of important, but you don't really need to know what the shield modifier of 1.0 instead of 1.1 does. It is good to have more, but it's usually not gonna kill you, and it's basically the same for all the builds, so it really doesn't change. Like, this cruiser also has a shield mod of 1. I think these ones are the highest for cruisers with 1.15, so the difference is kind of small. Escorts usually have a little less shield modifier. Okay, so when you look at the ship, you need to make sure that you have enough tactical slots, enough engineering, and enough science to fit in everything you need. Out of the ability list I gave you, which we are looking for, that really requires us to use certain ships. After that, you look at the lower bar and look for the consoles. These ones are the consoles. If you have, like on this ship, you have 2 tactical, 3 science, and 5 engineering. That is a little much on the engineering side and a little on the tactical side. Usually, as we are trying to kill our enemy, you will try to get as many tac consoles as you possibly can. Now, this is limited for Federation cruisers to a maximum of 4. To escorts, it's 5. And for Romulan warbirds, it's 5 also. The Scimitar, for example, is a 5 tac console ship, even though it is a cruiser, which does something else. Also, for let me find a escort here. We like this one. The Defiant has been a very prominent escort for a very long time in this game. As you can see, we have those 5 tac console upgrades, so that is kind of good. We have the 2 science, that is okay. We have 3 engineering. Now, people will slot in things that actually go into science or engineering consoles. As we are making more guide here for what you aim for and not what you start out with, let me tell you right away that you will not really decide your ship upon whether it has 2 science and 3 engineering or the other way around console modifications, because we use so many universal consoles anyways that it doesn't really matter. Okay. The escorts come with 4 forward weapons and 3 aft weapons, while a cruiser like this one, excuse me, almost always comes with 4 and 4. So the cruiser, generally speaking, has 1 more weapon. 1 more weapon is actually a good thing, like you can shoot more. Problem is, to really use this, we need to use a certain type of weapon. That is why you usually see cruisers with beams. Beams have a huge firing arc, so you can broadside the enemy and actually make use of all of your 8 weapons. While the escorts usually run 4 dual heavy cannons up front and 2 turrets in the back and a kinetic cutting beam, but we will explain why that is later. So the problem is, you could also just put beams on your escort, but you would always be 1 weapon short of what the cruiser can do. That's not necessarily very bad. Like, you can just go in a escort and still do 20k easily with beams. It's not really that game breaking, okay? But there's also, to the cruisers, you get the command things, the cruiser commands, which people actually use the strategic maneuvering, the shield frequency, and the attract fire. I realized that you can do it, you get the powers to do it, but the one you really should be looking at is the weapon system's efficiency, which reduces the drain on your weapons when you shoot by 25%. Now, this is really huge. Like, you shoot 8 arrays and you only get drained for 6. As we said in the earlier stream, your weapon's power directly increases your beam damage, and cannon damage as well. Therefore, this is a real good way to do more damage. Just use this weapon system's efficiency. That really increases your damage. Okay, so on cruisers we get the cruiser commands, which reduce our power consumption a little. On escorts we get the 5th tag console, which we usually do not on the Federation cruisers. The Galaxy class basically rules out itself with those 2 tag consoles and the Lieutenant tag. There's no real way to make that ship viable. If you look at the Sovereign class, not the other ugly ship, this one is basically what you will usually be looking for on Federation side to build a beam-fired rowboat. It comes with 4 tag consoles, which is the maximum you will find, and you get the Lieutenant Commander Tactical, and you get the good option to do a aux to bat on this. Okay, so you almost get all you need. What you don't get is the hangar bay and the 5th tag console. Also a viable option is the Fleet Advanced Heavy Cruiser. It also features 4 of those tag consoles. It doesn't bring the Ensign Tactical with it, but you get the Ensign Engineer instead, which could be used to a little more defensive value out of a engineer team, for example. And instead of the Lieutenant Universal, you are forced to use the Lieutenant Science, which can be good. As I said, it's a little more of a defensive ship. You trade off a little offensive power to the hazard emitters, transfer shield strength, engineering team, which just buys you survivability. If you are okay with that, if you are not on a DPS 30k run or something, the additional survivability can help you out really on the PSTF or something. The Fleet Battle Cruiser, also a very viable option. Bridge officer layout is almost identical to the Sovereign class, as the Lieutenant there usually is also used to be a Lieutenant Science. You get the 4 tag consoles, and instead of 4 and 4 weapons, you just get 5 in front and 3 in the aft, which can be used for fancy dual beambank layouts, but I would not really recommend to anyone to start out with that, possibly not even end up with it at this point in time. We have tried these, and even though the damage on the sheet seems to be 30% higher than a regular beam, you lose so much due to enemies not being an arc. You can't really find will all the time properly, and the damage spike itself isn't higher, therefore the damage might not actually in-game be different from the single arrays. The Fleet Chimera has 4 and 3 weapons. You could make out of this a no-win scenario boat if you really wanted to. I wouldn't really suggest it. The Fleet Dreadnought Cruiser, now this is a very interesting choice. It can be used to actually achieve quite good numbers. It only has this Lieutenant tag, but it also has this Ensign Universal station. You build out of this a aux to bat, Fire Duel 1, Beta 1 build and attack team. It can actually work, it can actually get you to 30k, I'm pretty sure. But it's not that convenient a ship to do it with. However, you get on top of all that you still get for being a cruiser, you get the 1 hangar bay, which you can then use for launching like elite Scorpion fighters. They will add just about 2k DPS to your results, okay? So that is quite good. But the ship's layout is not optimal. It is okay to do it. You definitely can build this ship to do good damage, but it's just not truly competitive with the other ones. The Fleet Patrol Escort is a fancy build around no-win scenario. Okay, so that was it. First of all, basically for the cruisers. For no-win scenario builds, we get the Fleet Patrol, which is not a good ship to start out with. I would only suggest it to people that actually know their ropes already. The Fleet Advanced Escort, and also the Prometheus skin. That is the average ship you would kind of see just because it brings this lieutenant commander science. So if you use the lieutenant commander science, you get your TBR1 and you get your GraphWell1. Those are two mandatory powers for no win scenario. Okay, I understand that you can do it without it, and I have seen people do it without it, and I know you can also do it with dual beambanks and single arrays, even if you really want to. But I'm trying to make you a player that can do it. Okay, I'm not trying to make it difficult or I don't know. Like, this is what you would look for if you try to beat it for the first time. This is the easiest way to do it. The Lieutenant Commander Science is what you look for on no win scenario builds. If you don't have the money to buy this ship, there's also the Mirror Escort something, the new one, which looks identical to these ones. It also has on that Mirror Escort version a Lieutenant Commander Science on it, but it only has 4 tech consoles. I think it costs like 60k EC on the exchange, so if you really don't have another ship, get that one. If you have a little more money to invest, you could also very well go for the Prometheus kind of ship, where that was. I probably scrolled just ahead of it. There it is, the Fleet Advanced Escort. Okay, this ship basically has everything we are looking for. It has 5 tech consoles, and it has the Lieutenant Commander Science. That is what we are looking for to build a no-win boat. If you try to build a escort for PvE missions that actually deal damage, you're looking for a vast amount of tech abilities, as you will need 2 cannon scatter volleys, 2 attack parents, and 2 tech teams. You would want emergency power to weapons, you would want directed energy modulation. So you need at least 2, which you can see here, engineering stations. You could also go for emergency power to shields and emergency power to weapons if you wanted to, and don't have the Marion Francis stuff. That is a viable option as well. So this ship could actually also be used for, this one's just out like kind of, I don't know. That's the internet coming out. So this ship could actually be used to run cannons through an ISE or something. You kind of get the Lieutenant Commander Psi and don't really know what to do with it. You could go for hazard, emitter strength, first shield strength, and gravity well. That is a good option just to get some crowd control in. Just talk very slowly and always drink some water. Awesome. Okay, so after you killed the Transformator on Infected, you have all those spheres spawning in the middle, and you could just use the gravity well to keep them from moving out. Okay, so even though it's not the theoretical highest possible DPS option, it is still a viable option to do. If one on your team does it, everyone else will benefit as well. So don't really hesitate, because you have this Lieutenant Commander Science. The ability is still cool to use. Okay, I think the Defiant is a little to the left here. Here we go. So this one is the most commonly used escort with cannons to run DPS runs with, or I should say it was before the Kumari came out. It has a outrageous amount of tech slots, bridge officer stations. It has a Lieutenant Engineer, which is emergency power to weapons 1 and directed energy modulation, and it has a Lieutenant Science, so we don't really feel any awkwardness in this ship, as we only really get what we actually use and also know where to use it. However, the developers thought of one new ship they decided to put out. It's called the Endorian Kumari Escort. It's a little ugly. It has 5 forward weapons, 2 aft. So basically you traded 1 aft weapon to a forward weapon. That way, as dual heavy cannons do more damage than a turret, you just gain damage by using this ship, and you drop the Science guy to be a Lieutenant Universal. You drop the Engineer to just be a Ensign. you get a little more tax slots. You don't really benefit from this. Now, the problem is you only need so much, right? You already have the attack pattern Omega 3, you already have the attack pattern Beta, and you already have 2 cannon scatter volleys. So what are these guys actually contributing? Like, you could get onto this ship for tag teams and still get all your attack abilities that you really want. You could build in a torpedo spread, but you don't need it, as it will lower your DPS overall. Okay. The Lieutenant Universal here would usually be used as a engineer. He would be the emergency power to weapons, direct energy modulation one. The other guy could be a emergency power to weapons as well, to make sure that you always have the buff. It, however, could also be a emergency power to shields with the buffs to reduce their cooldown, so you could actually alternate those two buffs. However, you need to understand that if you don't build Ox to Bad into your ships, you would either need 2 attack pattern Beta ones and 1 Omega one, or you need to have 2 Zamox for the cooldown of your cannon scatter volley to really catch up with all your attack patterns. Okay. For the cruisers, as I said, you would usually go for certain Ox to Bad ones. We basically covered all the important ships. On Federation side, you would actually point out at this point the Narcine cruiser. I don't have it, therefore I can't really show it to you. What it does is it's pretty much, what can we compare it with? It's basically a scimitar with 1 less tag console. And a little more possibilities into the build, but you don't really see that much of a difference. Okay, you can build it more defensively, but you don't really need to. The problem with that is, if you try to build a Federation cruiser, you get the cruiser commands, and that is kind of cool. Everyone likes you to have you stand close by. Okay, but outside of that, everyone would be better off flying the scimitar at this point in the time. Like, if you look at the Fleet Assault Cruiser, which we actually have over here as well. Let me switch to this. Okay, this is the ship. If you look at this one, you get the stations, which are currently really messed up. You get the stations to do a Federation cruiser build. You have the 2 engineers to do the Ox to Bad. You, however, will only get 4 tag consoles, and you don't get the hangar bay. The Narcine gets the hangar bay, but loses the cruiser commands, and the scimitar basically gets a 5th tag console and a hangar bay, and only pays with the cruiser commands, which you still can get if just someone else stands close to you. Okay, if he flies over to you and decides to be within 5k of you, you will always be better up with the scimitar at the end of the day. I personally am not a fan of this. The problem is I don't have the power to change it in any way. Therefore, the scimitar currently is the way to go if you look really to make DPS. If you really want to do beam fire at will damage, you would go for the scimitar. Okay, so, but for now, I kind of want to see what we can do on Federation side. So, as I pointed out, we have the good options with the Fleet Bat Cruiser, the Fleet Assault Cruiser refit, and those are the ones to look into for beam-fired will builds. Okay, so let's have a look here. The ship itself, my god, that nose is itching. Okay. Okay, so what should we start out with? Let's have a look at the stations first. This universal guy could be basically whatever you want him to be. You can always make this build work. What really comes into play here is the bridge officers. They all have certain traits on their own, okay? So all my tag guys are Romulans. You get them at the embassy. If you are already a Romulan, you can just recruit them from duty officer missions, or you could buy them on the exchange. they bring certain personal traits. There are three total important traits for space combat. We have the Superior Romulan Operative. This one increases your critical chance by 2% and your crit severity by 5%. That is very good. That is basically the best that you can currently get. However, the embassy bridge officers are only available as tag guys that bring this trait with them. Okay, so you want your tag guys to always be Romulan Superior Operatives. You get them at the embassy. The second best choice is a Nausicaan. He is obtained from having your duty officer thing here, the diplomacy rank up to 4, which awards you a single bridge officer candidate from an enemy faction. Now, the Nausicaan is a Klingon bridge officer, so you are free to choose him, and he brings the pirate ability with him. He just flat out increases all your damage by 1.5% in space combat. That is not as much as 2% crit chance and 5% crit severity, but he can also be an engineer and a psi guy. That is why I have these guys slotted in there. Okay. The third option that really does something is the Saurian. He has the efficient trait on him, which improves all your power levels. When you have low power allocated to a certain system, this increases to actually increase your power, so you can't see it. Outside of that, you could also get humans. Let's see if we can find their trait. They have increased subsystem repair and health regen. Now that is something you might want to consider if you try to build a tank or something. But in all honesty, in PvE, you don't need humans. Like, you would get Saurians and you would get Romulans, and if you can afford them, you would also get Nausicaans. But these ones can be costly, as they are kind of difficult to obtain. You only unlock one per diplomacy tier 4. Okay, that's why I only have 4 as well. There's just no way to get more. It's absurdly time-consuming. Okay, so that is what comes into play here. Which guys do you choose to be on your ship? If you go for 3 tag guys, you can get 3 superior Romulan operatives. So this already awards you with 6% crit chance and 15% crit damage. That is quite good, but usually not really worth it given up the additional survivability out of a psi guy, for example. Like if you put in one of these, you get the science team, the tractor beam repulsors could be used for damage, hazard emitters and transfer shield strength, or transfer shield strength hazard emitters. So that is what I would basically go for if I try to build out a ship that is kind of durable. Okay. Let's see which which bridge up they are all. Let's actually build out the ship a little more, so you get more of an impression as to how this should look. So now we have the options here what to do. We could go for attack pattern beta 1 and beamfight will 3. Our other option would be to go for attack pattern omega 1, which is lieutenant commander, and fire at will 2. Problem with that is your beamfight will is on a 20-second cooldown, and your attack pattern omega is on a 30-second cooldown. Second option would be to go for attack pattern beta 3 and beamfire at will 2. So these are the obvious options. Noteworthy at this point is your attack pattern beta debuffs your enemy when you hit them with an attack to reduce their damage resistance. Now that has a certain limit. If you play in a good group where you have 2 recluses, your beta will really not benefit your damage. Your beta will not really benefit your damage. Okay. If you play in a mediocre group, betas can actually be fine, and just because we can't really fit in an omega and get it to the firing cycle of our beams, I'll just build this with a beta one in Firewall 3, just to give you an impression on how that could look. So that would be this guy. We always want 2 tag teams so we can rotate them properly. There aren't really any options to choose from here as well. Okay, and then we need to take care of our engineering stations. We have the high rank in emergency power to weapons, and we have the high rank in directed energy modulation already. What we need to do is to reduce these abilities now all to the to the internal cooldown they have, like 15 seconds for beta and 20 seconds for the firewall, which I will train in just a sec. We need to get therefore 2 orcs to bats onto this ship. Engineer in space. That is not too difficult. As you can see, we already have the emergency power to shields one, emergency power to weapons 3. So we get a second orcs to bat to the engineer 2 guy. Okay. The last slot we could use to get one of these abilities. We already have emergency power to something ×2, so we already used that on the minimum time. Most viable option seems to be the engineering team as it awards us with a instant whole healing ability. Which leaves me only to switch out the science space guys. We need the transfer shield strength 1, for example, like this. And the hazard emitters 2, because it awards more whole healing and more damage resistance, okay? So this is that. And then we personally train the last guy to also get being fired will 3 to Solar. Okay, train. Okay, so let's beam up into space. We need to now increase the rank of those abilities on our guys. Then we can give it a shot if we wanted to. However, I will first try to show you basically what it looks like, why we did all these strange things. We already have that. We need this one, the engineering team, hazard emitters, transfer shield strength, and our 2 tag teams. Okay. So now we also need to train up these abilities so we can actually show how that works. Okay. Which ones did I all change? Tactical team. This is the second tactical team, really is only there to make sure that we can use it all the time. Okay, so for this build now, as we discussed earlier, we need 3 technicians that are these guys. They reduce on use of emergent auxiliary to battery your bridge officer power by 10% of their cooldown. Outside of that, we don't really have any mandatory abilities to put into this. We could use the space warfare, we could use the Dick Rock. He usually is very good on all emergent energy weapon builds, as he improves your subsystem power. The Con Officer, which reduces tag team, we don't need. We don't have the Marin Francis in yet, so that is what we would go for here. Okay, so and it just removed all the abilities when I did put them to the train. That's not very nice. Let's find out which one this is. Okay, and I think Immersive Power Shields was up here. Okay, so basically what we are looking for is, as I tried last time to point out with all those beautiful colors in the Excel sheet, we want to use all our buffs at the same time to upgrade our weapons to the maximum extent, and then shoot them with the maximum damage, and don't use our cooldowns randomly, okay? So we always go for the weapon system efficiency, as this reduces the drain of our abilities by quite a lot. And now we go for the emergency power to weapons, the attack pattern beta, and the beam fire at will. Okay, if we just use them, I will just do it with the mouse right now, so you can't see it. You will see that these two are basically on a similar cooldown, but the duration is very short compared to how long it takes for them to refresh. Okay, that is why we have the auxiliary to battery. Now, if I use this once, you will see how this cooldown gets shortened. Okay. If we actually use all two of them in between when these abilities are on cooldown, we will get this to the minimum duration. You will see the difference by the other animation, like when I use these emergency power shields, it has this clockwise animation, while the emergency power weapons has this vertical animation. The vertical animation is the minimum activation time in between the same abilities. That is what we want to see on our attack pattern beta and fire at will. If we use the aux to bat, it reduces their cooldown already. Still, you see that they only run for 1 more second, so we have 10 seconds of an overlap, but we have our second here now. Then you can see we get this beam fire at will 5 seconds under its minimum, so it will just get reduced to that. And now we could actually use it on a 20-second timer every single time, just by rotating our emergency power to batteries in between the cycles. Okay. Other abilities that will benefit from this are obviously our emergency power to subsystem ones. Our directed energy modulation will be reduced. The engineer team will be reduced, and the only real problem we have is it removes our auxiliary power. Like if I use this, it goes down to 4 or 5. It should actually go down to 5. And that affects our science abilities. So you shouldn't use transfer shield strength and hazard emitters just after you use your auxiliary to battery. If you just wait those 10 seconds, your power will come back. Now would be the time to use it. For example, if I use the hazard emitters, we cannot see the healing numbers because we're not damaged. That is a shame. And then you could use the auxiliary to battery after that. We also get with this all our power redistributed from our aux to the other subsystems, which is quite good to fulfill our amp on the warp core. Okay, so this is what you think about when you build a beamfired will boat. You need to get all your abilities down to the minimum activation time on a Federation ship. That usually requires you to get the aux to that. On the Scimitar, which we will look at next, we don't need to do this fancy thing. We just basically go for the abilities times 2. Just get 2 of those beamfired wills in, get the attack parents in and use a Zamok to reduce the attack parents cooldown. Okay. We also did cover our duty officers. We don't really need that many. We just have to get the technicians. They come free out of the Baytron cluster colonization. The Marin Francis really benefits our directed energy modulation. Dickrock for shield power. Warfare Dove, you could use reduced time to evasive maneuvers on very high DPS runs. You could use Kalel. They are all really usable on this. Okay. Okay, so that is it for stations and duty officers for the Federation cruiser build. So let's jump over to the Romulan cruiser, as that is kind of the similar topic here. I don't even know when I started. Oh, 40, possibly 40-50 minutes. We still have some time to cover what's going on. Okay, so this now is the Scimitar. The Scimitar brings all we want from it except for cruiser commands. It has 5 TAC consoles, it has the hangar bay, we don't really care about the layout of our engineering consoles. It has 8 weapons and also has a deflector impulse and all that. Okay, so it really features everything we need from it. Okay, for the stations, we get the Lieutenant Commander Universal, the Commander Tactical, the Ensign Universal, Lieutenant Engineer, and the Lieutenant Science. If you look at this, you basically see that we need not to use aux to bat on this. We could do the Lieutenant Commander Universal to be a engineer, get this and this one to be an aux to bat, get this one to be the directed energy modulation, and we could do it the same way we do it right now, but there's a reputation trait that really doesn't want us to do that. It makes it just more difficult to usually to actually execute all the aux to bats in between, and this is just easier and really benefits from something else, as we will discover later. Okay. So if you look at these, we have 2 times Fired Will 3, we have Attack Pattern Omega 3, we have Attack Pattern Beta 1, and we have our 2 tag teams. Emergency power to weapons, emergency power to shields, direct energy modulation, hazard emitters, and tractor beam repulsors. This one could also be hazard emitters, and this one transfer shield strength for more survivability. The tractor beam repulsors do actually deal damage. Therefore, on our runs, we usually kill stuff so fast that we don't really need the additional survivability, especially on a Romulan ship, as you get with the Valar console in quite outrageous amount of shield healing anyways. However, what this should tell you is, what do we need to make this work? We need 1 Zamok to reduce the cooldown for our attack patterns to align with our beam-fired wills, and we need 1 or 2 of the guys that reduce our emergency power to subsystem abilities. We could also go for 2 emergency power to weapons, but that's not really necessary. We should get the Marion Francis to get our directed energy modulation up, and outside of that, it's basically free of choice. Okay, so let's have a look down here. These are our major damaging abilities that we always want. We have the attack team. That one loses in value later. You basically want to use it defensively, as it distributes your shields way faster than manually, but for the initial burst, to put it in there is quite nice. Okay, so we go ahead and just use these abilities, and as you can see now, our beam-fired will is up, our attack pattern beta is up, emergency power to weapons, and the tag team just faded. Now we wait a little, and now it is really important to not fire the next attack pattern just right away. Wait for the cooldown of your beam array fired will to go away, and then use your attack pattern along with your beam fired will, and that way you can now see that the beam fired will really is the deciding factor on how fast we use our attack patterns. Like, we don't use our attack patterns on their own because we want to really benefit from them when we use our beam attacks. Okay, so that's why we wait for the beams to finish and not the attack patterns. And you see now that with 1 Zamok, this cooldown is basically where we need it to be. If we had 2, our attack pattern would be up way earlier, which would benefit us. Like, this is within 1 second, depending on which ability you use first. Since you're bound to the global anyways, it's really okay to do it this way. Okay, so 1 Zamok is all you need for this kind of build. If you don't have one, you could just put in a attack pattern beta 1 here, have 2 of those then in total, then you would just alternate the attack pattern betas in between when your Omega is still on cooldown. That really works. I have that tried on my KDF Romulan. He doesn't have anything on, so I can assure you that you don't need to have a Zamok. For the other duty officers, this build's a little screwed up right now. I tried to PvP the other day. we again have the Dick Rock. The power levels are somewhat more of an issue on Romulan ships anyways, so he helps out again. The Marion Francis and the damage control engineer reduces the recharge time for Mercy Powder subsystems. That's why I have different Emergency Powder subsystems in here. If you really want to make sure that you do optimal DPS, you could just use two Emergency Powder weapons. But if you do the DPS 10k runs every now and then, having the Emergency Powder shields is good as well. Okay. Outside of that, Romulan ships have another big advantage, which you don't get on Federation ships, which is called the Romulan Battle Cloak. If you read the tooltip, it says, after decloaking plus 40% all damage for a brief duration. So let's cloak up our ship here, look at this tooltip. It reads 1.1k. We decloak, we would expect now something over 1.5k, obviously. As you can see, that doesn't happen. It only goes to 1373, which is because this tooltip out of 40%, I don't know when they changed that. Back in the day, it showed 25%, and the damage increase you actually get still is 25%. So don't let this mislead you. It's still worth getting it. Like it lasts for 15 seconds if you use the correct bridge officers. As I said earlier, on the Federation ships, the best ones you can get are Romulans, obviously, for the crit chance. On a Romulan ship, however, you get everyone Romulan except for one. Tag 3 Cloak, he's called a mine, and he must be a, or should be a Reman. The Reman increases, let's find it. Which one is it? It's the Superior Infiltrator. After decloaking, increases the duration of your ambush damage boost by 10 seconds. Now this does not properly stack. If you use two of those, you don't, or you shouldn't get 20 seconds on top of the 5 that actually come with this ability. So consensus seems to be that you either are yourself a Reman and get an additional Reman that should award you 22.5 seconds, or you just go with one Reman and get those 15 seconds. Okay. Also, what this does is it allows you to make sure that you get a GDF. You will drop your shields, and now any kinetic damage that takes you below 50% is a guaranteed GDF. And it's really easy on most missions to get that. On ISE, you have the initial cube. On Kittimer, you have the big tactical cube. You don't even need to cloak, but if you cloak, you can use the Brace for Impact. It will usually take you to 40%. On the pure space, you would get the first cube, or just stuff like that. Get your GDF, and that is such a huge damage increase. That is actually unbelievable. We should talk about captains as well at some point. Okay, but however, this basically is what you look at on a cruiser. Okay, you want 2 fired worlds, 2 attack patterns, 2 tag teams, 2 emergency powers, 1 direct energy modulation usually is enough. You can't really fit into on Federation cruisers with the Oxymet. You benefit from having the cooldown reduction on your damage, direct energy modulation as well, but that difference is really small. Okay. Okay, so let's have a look at the general layout of a cannon build. We could use the Kumari, but that looks quite the same like the Defiance, so just because I like the ship, I'll just showcase what it would look like with the Defiant now. As you will see, the difference really is not that big. The playstyle is a little different, but we will cover that later. Okay, so as you can see, we now use cannons, so that is all a little different. We would go for the other abilities now. Let's see here. This guy basically can stay the way he is. We already have 2 attack pattern betas. We have 1 Omega 1. We just need to retrain this scatter volley. Filter tactical space. Scatter volley 2, that should be to be the lieutenant commander. Scatter volley 2 just awards 5% more damage than the scatter volley 1, so using higher ranks here is good always. And we want to get the engineer in space direct energy modulation. Okay. Something like this. If you look at this, this is a decent solid cannon build now. Didn't really require to change that much. We don't have our aux to bats anymore, so what do you need to think about when you look at this build? Just one emergency power, which is the wrong one. You would want this to be the emergency power for weapons. Let me just grab that one real quick. So, okay, just like this. That is what you would look for. This is now not very defensive. If you use this, you might really die. But you know, stuff happens, and dying isn't as bad as dealing 3k DPS. I mean, even if you die 4 or 5 times, with such ability you will still deal basically any time more than 10k. There's no real way, if you use your abilities on cooldown and point your ship at the enemy and just use the spacebar to auto-fire, you will end up with more than 3k, okay? What you need to think about though, you should get a cooldown reduction for your emergency power weapons now, as you only have one emergency power. That is quite important to get this one lowered. You will need, or you should get the Marin Francis. If you don't have them, you might actually consider going for another ability here, like emergency power to shields. 1 emergency power weapons 2 could be a viable option. Also, you will need either 2 Zamox or 1. Let's actually try out what happens if we don't have one.